Jesus said, "Have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham and Sarah, the God of Isaac and Rebekah, and the God of Jacob and Rachel and Leah." In the name of the one holy and living God, amen. Let's be seated. God is never just God. God is the God of our names. Because with God, it is always personal. God is not just the God of earth and sky or even the God of any specific country. God says, "I am the God of Abraham and Sarah, the God of Isaac and Rebekah, and the God of Jacob and Rachel and Leah." And in a moment when we read the names of those beautiful images of God who died on our city's streets this year, God reminds us, "I am the God of Laverne and David, the God of Robert and Marina, the God of DJ and Glenda and Kathleen." As a follower of Jesus, my faith teaches me that God is always particular, that with God it's always personal. That when God decided to become human, God didn't do it as a generalist, but took the specific form of Jesus of Nazareth, a human being with human parents and human friends, and all of them had names. In John's Gospel, God in Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd, who calls each of his sheep by name. That's us. That is all of us. That is each of us. There was a moment when each of us, those of us who are present in this room tonight and those whom we love but see no longer, each of us were given a name. And even if that name changed as we lived our lives, even if we decided that name no longer fit us and we needed to claim the power of choosing another, whatever that name became also became a part of us. It was and is personal. Even if your name is as commonplace as mine, Mike, when attached to a human being, it becomes unique and beautiful, just as each one of us is unique and beautiful. And God says that name over and over and over again with every beat of our heart, with every breath we take. God says our name in love over and over again. The Good Shepherd calling each of God's sheep by name, loving us each deeply in that way that can only happen when it's personal. And with God, it's always personal. Would that were true for us all. Because at some point, we forget. We forget that we are made in God's image. We forget that each other is too, and we forget to call one another by name. And we start using terms like the poor and the homeless. We stop being people with names to each other and start being classes and terms, and when that happens, we become problems to solve or maybe even to ignore rather than precious images of God to love and honor and respect. And then before we know it, as a society, instead of looking one another deeply in the eye and calling one another by name, we start just talking about ending homelessness or helping the poor or feeding the hungry. And it's out of the goodness of our heart, but the language we use betrays us. In fact, the language we use dooms us to failure because it has stopped being personal. When something is personal, it keeps us up at night. When something is personal, we feel the joy and the pain so much more keenly. When something is personal, what happens to one is felt by all. When something is personal, we know that alleviating suffering is not about solving a problem or curing a societal ill. When something is personal, we know that our very salvation depends on restoring our fellow child of God to the full dignity that we are all and each deserved. As a Christian, I know this from this season of Advent we are in. God became human in Jesus. God took a human name and became human in a world full of names so that God could feel the joy and the pain of each one of us, so that what happened to us could happen to God. Like the Good Shepherd, God will never abandon not just all of us, God will never abandon any of us. Because with God, it's always personal. And God yearns for it always to be personal for us too. And so I wonder, when did it happen to those whom we name tonight? When did each of them, to so many, too many in this world, stop being Marina or George or Kenneth and start being merely the homeless? When did we as a society, after these beautiful named images of God had been stripped of so much, decide to strip them even of their names as well? Tonight is a memorial service, but it is so much more than that. Tonight is a restoration. Tonight, as we read these names, we restore to these beautiful images of God, loved but seen no longer, what our society took from them, their names. Names known and never forgotten by those closest to them. But names stripped from them by a society that on some level knows that if we learned the names, we would be bound by honor, love, and basic human decency to insist that the world itself change, so that not one of these named images of God ever was without a home, or a decent meal, or education, or medical care, or employment. Because the truth is, we will never solve homelessness or eradicate hunger and poverty as long as we talk about it in those terms. We will never do it because we will never care enough together to get the job done. It is only when it is personal, only when we call one another by name, that we will care enough to come to the day where nobody lives and dies on the streets alone anymore. That we will be transformed by the knowledge that each name has a face with gifts that make each of our lives and our common life infinitely richer. And that it is to all of our poverty when those names slip away forgotten into the collective nouns of dismissal and erasure. God says, I am the God of Abraham and Sarah, the God of Isaac and Rebekah, the God of Jacob and Rachel and Leah. And tonight God says, I am the God of Laverne and David, the God of Robert and Marina, the God of DJ and Glenda and Kathleen, and so many more whom we name this night. God is never just God. God is the God of our names, because with God it is always personal. May it be for us as well. Amen.